It's 7:05 now, so we might as well get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending the Embankment Preservation Coalition's annual meeting. The meeting will be recorded tonight. We thought we should let you know that. And as we've mentioned already, we'd certainly like to see your faces with the video, but if you could keep yourselves on mute, that would be much appreciated. We hope that you, your family, your friends, and your coworkers are safe and healthy. Preserving the 6th Street Embankment and the Harsmith Branch as a historic landmark and public open space has proven to be a complicated undertaking. The EPC has nonetheless remained committed, vigilant, and agile. Tonight, we will update you on our vision for the corridor. Architect Sean Gallagher, who mentors our design team, will provide insights into why we believe our appreciation and nurturing of what has become an urban forest on the embankment and our light touch approach to providing access and enjoyment is the best direction for the future of this amazing resource. Bethany Wall, who heads our volunteer operation, will update us on the many ways we are working with volunteers, developing teams, keeping our membership up to date on how they can participate. We would not be here today without the support of our volunteers. Your attendance at countless city council meetings and zoning meetings has been key, and your participation will continue to be key as we progress towards a settlement. Donnelly, secretary of our organization and chair of our membership committee and mentor to our communications and outreach committee, will discuss how you can get involved, become a member, and how you can follow us on social media. Maureen Crowley, our coordinator, and I must say our heart and soul of this organization, will give us a brief background on the settlement, which has been years in the making, its structure, the parties, the process, and the near-term projected timeline. Maureen will then introduce Mayor Fulop, who will take us through where we are with negotiations, what we will achieve through settlement, and the progress we have made to date. There will be an opportunity after the mayor speaks to ask questions. Please send your questions to me, Stephen Gucciardo, via the private chat function on your Zoom application. I will present your questions to the mayor as time allows. And please be patient with us as we make our way through these presentations and the technology. And now I'd like to introduce Sean Gallagher.
So I hope everyone is well tonight. I'm going to take us through a little bit of a reminder of the vision and a little bit more of the vision that we've been working on. As everyone knows, the embankment is a historic site. The stone structures, a landmark in the city, the state, and at federal levels. It's a green infrastructure. It cleans the air, absorbs stormwater, it provides biodiversity, and it's a community corridor that connects our neighborhoods together. But what's really special about the embankment is it's a landscape that's 30 feet above the city that has been untouched for over 30 years. And in that time, natural meadows and forests grew in the center of our city. And the current ecosystem that's there, it's thriving. It's a 30-year-old mature upland forest that's completely novel to Jersey City and our climate. And it's really like no other ecosystem in the world. It's place specific, it's homegrown. And if you go up there, I'm not saying you should go up there now, but if you go up there, it's amazing. You feel like you have been transported out of our city deep into the Palisades wilderness. And it's this natural landscape, this transportive experience that has molded our vision for the embankment. It's an ecological vision. It's inspired by conservationists like Otto Leopold, where we preserved 30-year-old natural resources and learned to see them as a living member of our community, fostering a new relationship with it, where we use it with love and respect. But to do this, our approach has to be a light touch on this landscape, as light as possible, leaving much of what exists today intact and adding enough to safely experience it, to safely experience the meadows and the forest. The idea would be to create a continuous corridor from Manila Avenue to Bergen Arches, way above the city, where you would fade in and out of forest canopies to sunny meadows, feeling as if you have left the city completely. We imagine 3 types of environments that will make up this continuous path: land bridges that continue the ecological corridor, the nature, past developments and over streets, meadows, where they are active landscapes where you can explore and roam freely and find things, and forests that are really in the spirit of rails to trails, pathways through our natural landscapes, through our preserved natural landscapes. And the embankment, it'll be part of a greater East Coast Greenway Trail that goes all the way from Florida all the way up to Maine. It connects our neighborhood to this great American outdoor experience where you can hike right from your apartment in Jersey City up to Maine if you want. But it will also be a catalyst for connecting our neighborhoods together with walkable trails from the Hudson to the Pacific River, from Bayonne to Hoboken, from every neighborhood within Jersey City. And it's this vision, this ecological vision, that will make Jersey City more sustainable and more resilient. It's going to add 8 acres of public green space to our city. It will sequester 120 tons of carbon dioxide per year. It will produce another 88 tons of oxygen per year. And it will sequester 8.6 million gallons of stormwater per year, which is really important to our city. And at the same time, it will help reduce the overall city's heat island effect, any city's heat island effect. But here, being down the spine of our city is super important. And it will increase biodiversity within the city. It will allow things to naturally migrate through our city, and we can learn and explore more about the world around us. And it will be a place for connecting people with nature in many ways, even through art. In a city with so many artists, the ecological vision offers a niche for ephemeral art, eco art, art like Andy Goldsworthy or Maya Lin, to inspire a community to find their own ecological identity or to be inspired by the nature around them. But the best thing about this ecological vision, it's economically sustainable. The meadows in the forest, they already exist. No need to design or construct a landscape. It's an evolved naturally and thrives within the actual context here. There's no need for the city to be watering it, tending to it. It's no maintenance. And it's this community-focused natural landscape that we're really interested in. And we have only just begun this effort. And we're excited for everybody to get involved and to help mold this vision or this idea into a reality. So I want to introduce you to Bethany Wall, who heads up our outreach and volunteer organizations, because it's really about us coming together and figuring out how to actually execute on this. Bethany, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thanks, John. I always love to kind of be refreshed on this vision for this embankment park and space and reuse. So thanks for that. Steve was mentioning that volunteers are so important to the coalition, and really, as an all-volunteer organization, volunteers have been the lifeblood of the coalition for over 20 years. We would not be here today by any stretch without the many, many people who have been involved along the way. So thank you to all of those. There are many of them on the phone today, many more to come, we hope. And to that end, last year, as we were looking toward a settlement, we were realizing that there was going to be even more work to come. So, so what we wanted to do next, Sean, is we decided it would make sense maybe to try to organize volunteers in teams in a way that really could really more efficiently get some of the work done and help people plug into places where they could really share their talents and skills and passions. So we extended this invitation, and at or after that meeting, we had nearly 50 people sign on, which was really exciting. And we began conversations next. And, you know, things were kind of looking good. And then, of course, coronavirus hit. And, And so it has been the weirdest year ever, certainly, and that slowed us down a bit. But as you can see here, we've gotten some things done. We got some projects lined up. We have an art project that's ready to launch, a science study that is ready to go when the time is right. There was the citywide cleanup in early October, and some of our volunteers helped coordinate an embankment portion of that, component of that. So thanks to all who participated there as well. We have a study group that is, reading different books that in one way or another kind of apply to the vision and the things that we're thinking about for and with the embankment. Right now, we're reading Jane Jacobs' classic, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. And if you want to join that conversation, we'd love to have you. So at the bottom of this, well, actually, it's not at this slide. It'll be the next slide, but we invite you to just email us at embankmentjc at gmail.com to let us know what you're interested in. Do you want to join that study group? How might you plug in? Next, we have a number of volunteers who jumped in, I should say, really early and kind of helped us think about this, trusted us to kind of get these teams going. And you see their names here, but super quickly, I just want to say to Eileen, Jenna, Pedrick, Alex, Karen, Elena, Amy, Erica, Arena, Michael, and Galina, if you're here, even if you're not, thank you so much. We really appreciate so much your working with us, partnering with us. And, I think a call to action that you're going to be hearing about, maybe a little bit more when Stephen speaks again a little bit later, but is, there's always many public meetings involved. Those of you who were involved a number of years ago, remember those meetings at City Hall and elsewhere, many, many meetings where community members came out, they showed support either simply by being in the room or by sometimes speaking about why they supported this effort. And all of that support is so important. So really encourage you to kind of keep your ear to the ground, which is easy to do by staying on our mailing list, by being a member, and by coming out when the time is right. So to help you think about how to be a member, I'm going to turn it over now to the capable hands of Christina Donnelly. So Christina. Thank
you, Bethany. Thank you. I just want to echo everybody else who on this call has thanked all of our loyal supporters, members, and volunteers many of whom are on this call tonight. And I think it is nearly impossible to have come this far without each and every one of you. So from all of us on the Embankment Board, we thank you wholeheartedly for all you do for us. Each year, we use this annual meeting to remind our supporters to renew or become members for the coming year. And we have many membership options, and our goal is to really keep it accessible for all. I ask that you go to the Get Involved section of embankment.org, and what you will find is this visual that you see now. You'll see a link to become a member, and it will show you the various dollar amounts for the memberships. For us, it's really more than the dollar amount that you select. It's actually the number of members that we have. A large number of memberships helps us in the grant process, as it shows that there's community interest for our project. If now is not the time to join as a paying member, we're in a tough year right now. So if it's not the time to be a paying member, we ask that you subscribe to our email. If you have not already, I know a lot of you already have, but this also allows you to remain not only up to date with news, but we can also count you as a supporter in our grant process. If you could move to the next slide, Sean. I'm excited because this year, besides our newsletter and emails that I know a lot of you are on, you can now also follow us on social media. We have had a Facebook presence, but we recently launched Twitter and Instagram pages, and the addresses are shown on this slide. If you move to the next slide, this is my thank you to Galina Espinoza, who really carried us over the finish line with launching social media. She's an expert at this stuff and just shepherded us along. And her help has been invaluable, and I've really enjoyed working with her and hope to continue to do so. I'd also like to thank Lenny Spiro. I know he's on the call. A big shout out to him. He's always at our annual meetings and with his postcards. And I'm really sorry that we're not there to buy a postcard. Lenny is an accomplished photographer who has taken beautiful shots of the embankment for many years, and some of which, we have on our site. And I hope with Lenny's approval that we can use on social media. And finally, Ryan Williams, who was instrumental not only with our new website, but also with this Zoom meeting, getting us up to date on how to, all the right parameters to make sure that everybody's muted and the thing's recorded. So thank you, Ryan, for helping us with that, as well as several other IT infrastructure projects that just has moved us along. We hope to be very active on social media going forward. So if any of you have an interest in joining Galina and me in that, we'd love to have you. And you can reach out anytime to our email, which is embankmentjc@gmail.com. And now I'd like to introduce Maureen. She doesn't really need an introduction, but I will say she's obviously a founding member of our embankment board. And I'll remind her to get off mute.
Thank you, Christina. I needed that reminder. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Before the mayor speaks about the settlement of litigation over the Harsmas branch that's gone on since 2006, for those new to our project and as a refresher to others, I'm just going to give a very brief background about how we got to this point where we're trying very hard to settle the litigation. Next. So the parties to the settlement, our friends and allies on our side are our organization, the Embankment Preservation Coalition, the City of Jersey City, and Rails to Trails Conservancy, a national organization, nonprofit. And on the other side, we've been litigating against Conrail, SLH Properties, which bought the property from Conrail unlawfully in 2005. And now they've brought in a new organization that isn't involved in the litigation, but will help us settle, the Jersey City Embankment Associates.
Excuse me, Maureen, there's a bit of feedback. Can I just remind everybody to mute who's not, anyone except for Maureen, if you could just mute just to be sure, because there's a bit of feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear that. Next, Sean. Obviously, when you're doing a settlement, you have to take into account all the interests of all the parties. So what our side is interested in is historic preservation, first and foremost, park and open space, certainly, on a level with historic preservation, habitat conservation, and conserving the forest that's grown there naturally, as Sean talked about. Connectivity. This is a railroad right-of-way that was put together more than 100 years ago, and we don't want it broken up. It can serve the city in multiple ways. And then stormwater control. The embankment is basically a rain sink for all the stormwater that we get in the downtown, which is very subject to flooding. On the other side, Conrail's interested in selling the right-of-way because they don't see a use for it. And obviously, the residential developer wants to develop. So both sides now are firmly agreed that we don't want any more litigation. And that's the major incentive for the settlement for all of us. Next. This is just a brief overview of what the settlement process is. And a settlement has to be signed by all the parties to it, and then we have to have it approved at all levels of government. Locally, that's our administration, which we can count on because they've been a litigation partner with us. The council, which we have to convince is a good settlement for the city. Land use boards, as development and park development goes on. the Jersey City Redevelopment Organization. At the state, we have to satisfy the State Historic Preservation Office. And at the federal level, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, they don't take sides, but basically their interests coincide with ours. And then there's the Surface Transportation Board, the regulatory agency that will have ultimate stays over what happens with the resource. And we have to get through all those approvals before we can close on the property. Next. So because of the STB's involvement, we have structured the settlement in such a way that we hope that it will satisfy, it will get us all what we want and satisfy the Surface Transportation Board. The STB is mandated by federal law. Then there's that interference again going on. Everybody mute, please. The National Historic Preservation Act mandates that the federal agency has to review the effect that its decision of abandoning the rail line will have on historic resources. And we have so many historic resources that development, which is considered an adverse effect, will affect. We have the embankment itself, the entire Harsmas branch, and all the historic districts and sites all along the branch. So what this process results in is what is called mitigation. But this could be weak. The STB so far is talking about mitigation as documentation and signage. That's not what we want. We want the actual resources to be protected. So we're settling our settlement, we're structuring it so that the public benefits of preservation of the longer corridor and open space are more meaningful mitigation for adverse effects. Next. So our goal until today was to sign off and present a settlement to the council in December, but we have some new wrinkles. There's new management at Conrail, and they're now delaying that possibility. And so what we've determined today is we're trying to agree on every remaining issue to present a complete package to Conrail and make it as easy as possible for them to sign off on this settlement. So we're now aiming for the new year. Next. So
I guess that's me.
I'd like to introduce you, Mayor.
Yeah.
I wanted to say a few words.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. All right. So let me start by just saying thank you to the Embankment Coalition, and I see many of the familiar faces that have spoken earlier today and have been involved in this for close to 20 years. Many of you remember the city council meetings that we used to have that were packed with activists, and the only reason that this structure still stands today is because of those activists in those meetings. I mean, many of you remember that the sentiment going into those meetings was probably on the side of moving forward on some of the proposed plans at that time. And had it not been for literally hundreds of people showing up, we would be in a different place today. And then over the last 20 years, many of you remember that every step has been a struggle. Whether it's hiring our council, whether it's getting the city at times to support some simple changes that seemed like common sense. At every turn, there were obstacles and challenges. And so when Maureen said earlier that in the bottom of the ninth inning, there's a little bit of a curveball here with Conrail, I don't think any of you are surprised. It's kind of par for the course with regards to this whole narrative that we've been experiencing for 20 years. But I truthfully am very, very optimistic that we are on the goal line and we will get through this in the next month or so. There's very, very small details that we need to work through. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to walk everybody here through the high level concept and details of what we're proposing as far as the settlement goes. we've been in lockstep with the Embankment Coalition, particularly with Maureen and Steve, every single step of the way. We actually share counsel on this. So our lawyer is their lawyer, is your lawyer. And that provides a lot of commonality with regards to strategy and making sure that we're consistently aligned. And I suspect that the way it's framed today, if it was to move forward, there would be reasonable support on the city council for this as well. But I think, as Maureen mentioned, it will definitely entail one last time people coming out to the city council and making sure that people recognize that this is something that's been a long process and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. One final point before we talk about the details of the settlement here is that what's been really special about working with the Embankment Coalition is I think that they've had such a long-term plan with regards to this particular property. And whenever there was an opportunity for a short-term win, the Embankment Coalition really pushed back on that and has said that, no, we have a clear mission with regards to the potential right-of-way, with potential open space, how we're going to achieve that. And we prefer to do that only the right way so that we can look at ourselves in the mirror every single day and know that we handled ourselves with integrity to make sure that the city's protected long after all of us are here. And I think that there aren't many organizations that would have approached it that way, being that there were times in this process where there were short-term wins that were very possible, but maybe there were compromises that the Embankment Coalition weren't willing to give at that point because of their mission long-term. So it's a special group, needless to say. So with that, let's start with the slides. So let's start with kind of the big picture overview of what we're looking to do. Residential development on one block, which is the Marin block. And then we're looking for open space and the city to have some sort of ownership for the remaining blocks. And then part of this negotiation, which was important to us, was creating a framework as well for moving the development of the park forward. As you'll see, we were very mindful of making the development only on that first block and being consistent with the other developments on Marin, which are larger buildings. Now, also, I would highlight that a lot of the framework that we've been working on off of here has been off of a settlement that actually started prior to my administration. And it started and then it stopped and then it started and then it stopped. And we took some of the framework that was agreed upon them and we built upon that. We added some additional things that we thought were important for the community, important for the city. And this is kind of the concept of what we're looking to achieve. So residential development on the first block, 8 acres of open space, a 30-foot wide trail throughout, protecting the right of way for a light rail, and then some dollars for the park to begin construction of what we want to be a Highline type entity with a long-term connectivity to multiple municipalities, which I'll talk about as well. So if we could turn the page here. All right, so there are a lot of components here and a lot of things that we have to get through that protect this structure. Each of these have been challenged at some point through this process, and we've had to defend them. And we feel that through this all, there's a lot of belts and suspenders, so to speak, to make sure that the embankment is always protected and it looks how it looks today, with a lot of the things that Sean mentioned earlier with regards to the aesthetics that are important. Go to the next slide. Okay. So the key here is that the developer is going to own the first block, which makes sense, being that there's going to be a building on that of residential units. And then the rest of the branch is going to be owned by the city or an easement for a nonprofit, ultimately, is what it's going to be based on this settlement. And now the long-term plan, as I touched on earlier, is to have connectivity between basically the waterfront on the Hudson, extending all the way back over the 6th Street embankment, through the Bergen Arches, and then many of you have read about where we're going with OSI with regards to acquiring a bike lane, a bike path that will connect Jersey City ultimately to Montclair, so Hudson County through Essex County. So the big picture here is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for any city. You don't see chances like this that surface, and that's why we're really mindful of putting all these pieces together, because they happen to be aligned in this particular moment. Next slide. Okay, so block one, this is important. I'm sure we're gonna have questions on this and how we got to this. So it's gonna be 2 high-rise buildings, market rate rental apartments, consistent with the zoning that's there today, meaning the zoning that's on the adjacent properties. If you travel up and down Marion, you've seen that there are some sizable buildings on that. The maximum is 875 units, of which 350 parking spaces, as you can see from the slide. The 350 parking spaces are based on what we've seen prior with regards to usage in those high-rise buildings. And it's important to recognize that if somebody doesn't use those parking spaces, or a unit there chooses not to use a parking space, they are not entitled to on-street parking anyway, based on ordinances in Jersey City. So they couldn't get a parking permit to park on the street if they chose not to use those parking spaces, or the building was short parking spaces. But we don't anticipate that. And so the size is consistent with where we've been before, and then it scales back to a park for the remaining blocks. Next slide. Okay, so this kind of breaks down a lot of the benefits that are important to us, and a lot of the details that we've worked through with the developer through all of these negotiations over the last couple of years. So we wanted to make sure that the walls are retained. We think they're aesthetically important to the history of Jersey City. You cannot recreate that, so we're very, very mindful of that. We wanted to make sure that there's a right-of-way for the potential light rail long-term, and this is something that I touched on earlier, that the embankment coalition was unwilling to compromise on that at all, even though that there's no funding today anywhere in the state for a light rail, and there's no funding for the foreseeable future. This was something that the embankment coalition was very mindful of, with design of the building, with language there, to make sure that when that opportunity does arise, that there's an opportunity to move east-west within the city from mass transit light rail. We wanted to make sure that there's staircase and access to the top of the embankment that is easy to get to from a lot of different places. We wanted to make sure that it's ADA compliant, and we know that's an expensive feature, so we wanted to incorporate that as well. And we wanted to make sure that there are bathrooms and restrooms available, because we recognize that if this is done properly, the way that we're proposing for it to be done, it will be a destination park in northern New Jersey, and we want to make sure that there are features like restrooms that are important for destination parks. Next slide, please. So this is the Manila to Erie. It's going to be a bridge from one block to the next block, fully landscape park. And then this estimate is $11.5 million in investment built by the developer, and then of course owned and maintained by the city. Now, where does that $11.5 million come from? You know, all of the dollars on what the givebacks are done by independent outside financial consultants that the city hires to assess what the give and takes are, what the developer's proposing, what the city's asking for, what the cost would be to construct that if we were to do it ourselves versus what they're asking for as far as the number of units. And we net that all out in order to come to kind of where we are today. So when you see kind of this sort of dollar amount, it isn't something that we're just reaching for pie in the sky. It is based on kind of concrete information that we kind of dig into to make sure that what we're saying to you is accurate. Next slide. Okay, blocks 3 through 8. So this is Brunswick to Beyond. Again, open space, trail owned, design, built by the city. We'll talk about, I'm sure in the questions, how we're going to get that completed. Again, a 30-foot trail to run on north side, then switch it south at the Brunswick block. Reason being is what I touched on earlier, just long-term planning for when none of us are in this city anymore, whether it's in 50 years, 80 years, that there's a potential for a light rail. We want to make sure that that is there, and that whoever is here in Jersey City can execute on the plans that we've laid today. And then, of course, we've worked with Conrail to make sure that there's the necessary framework and space to accomplish all that. Next slide, please. Okay, so this kind of walks through a little bit more of the Conrail to city easements. And again, I would say this is consistent. These are some details that I'm sure we could circulate, but this is consistent again with what I said earlier with regards to making sure that there's connectivity not only on the embankment, but beyond the embankment for a potential light rail long term. And we've really thought about what the length of a size of the space that we would need, who owns it, how to connect different properties, where it would need to go. And so there's been tough negotiations with Conrail through this process. So it hasn't only been the SLH property owners, but also with Conrail, because the Embankment Coalition has been very, very mindful that you need to create this entire corridor. Having just a piece of the corridor won't accomplish our goal. So this is part of the framework for a settlement. Next slide. I think this is pretty consistent with what I just said. And this touches on the fact that we're looking for a longer term bike trail that'll go from Essex County to Hudson County. And OSI is acquiring that property. There's been a lot of articles over the last 6 months about that. And the Bergen Arches and the embankment will feed directly into that. Next slide. Q&A. So I think Steve said that I guess we could put the questions into the chat and Steve will moderate. But again, we're open to any conversation. We want to make sure that we take in all the feedback, questions, inquiry. We want to make sure that everybody's comfortable on where we are today on this.
Okay, okay, Mayor. Let's see. Well, you know, there's one question that's much on our mind, Mayor. How did you do today in your conversations? Any update on the labor issue?
Yeah, okay. So let me talk a little bit about the labor issue, because this has been a holdup and an obstacle that I think we're going to overcome, but it's very, very important to me. And I think it's important to the residents of the city. We have been clear that we feel that this needs to be done with proper union labor, with proper benefits, proper pensions, proper health care for workers. And the reason that I feel in particular that we need to be mindful of projects like this is, number one, it is a massive zoning change here as part of the settlement. There's no other way to characterize this. And the unions over the last 6 or 7 years have been partners in a program that we launched with them called Project Impact. In 2013, 2014, myself and Freeholder Bill O'Day went to the building trades, and we were clear with them that we didn't feel that they were hiring enough Jersey City residents and minorities to build all of the projects that were being built in Jersey City. We felt that there was a clear trend that people were coming in from outside of Jersey City and benefiting from all of the construction that was happening here. And we were saying to them that if we are going to be the driver of the building trades business, or the dominant driver in New Jersey, meaning Jersey City is going to be, we wanted to make sure that Jersey City residents benefit from that. So over the last 5 years, we've set up a program called Project Impact, and the building trades have been very, very mindful about going to the high schools, training Jersey City young men and women, getting them into the building trades and launching them with careers into the buildings here in Jersey City. And I think if we would turn our back at this stage with such a large project on all of those people that have been hired, it would be counter to what we've preached for the last 5 or 6 years. And so this has been an important point to us. The developer today says that they can't make it work financially. And we feel if they can't make it work financially, then they're just paying too much for the property to Vicky Hyman. And she needs to be adjusting her price at this stage. It shouldn't be coming from the backs of Jersey City residents. And so that's been the impasse where we are today. I had a conversation, Steve, today with Pat Kelleher and with Bill O'Day. We're going to put together some language that we're going to present to the developer next week. And I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to get to a place that it's resolved. So I'll have more information after I see them on Monday morning.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question here. Mayor, I understand the first block will be a high-rise, but will there be a coordinated long-term vision in development so as to maintain a view of the waterfront skyline, at least at one point along the embankment, even at an angle? This may require additional planning surrounding future developments in the PAD, or will it ultimately all views of the waterfront be blocked by high rises?
I mean, Steve, you could probably touch on this as well, but we have been mindful, and the Embankment Coalition has been very, very clear with the developers that the way the building is structured, we want to make sure that those right-of-ways are protected, which ultimately is a right-of-way and visibility all the way down to the Hudson River. And at points in the conversation, just to bring everybody up to speed, there was a lot of discourse around potentially having the building even cantilever out over part of it in order to achieve what the developer was looking to achieve, but still protect the things that were important to us. So the short answer to your question is yes, it is something that the Embankment Coalition has been mindful of, and it's been part of the negotiations and conversations.
Yes, I can chime in on that, Mayor, and say we've been very diligent about that. And if you're on the embankment looking east, remember you're on the north side of the north edge of the embankment, which is the south side of 6th Street. You have all of 6th Street as a corridor clear to the waterfront. And then you have 30 feet on top of the embankment, also free and clear with views of the waterfront. So what we can do with this project, we're doing as much as possible to maintain that view corridor.
Yep.
I have another one here. Are there estimates for how much the total cost will be, specifically from Brunswick to Marin, trying to understand how much impact the $11.5 million contribution will have?
Yeah.
I can help you with that one on few, but you probably know the details, Mayor. So,
go ahead, Steve. Start it off, and I'll chime in after you.
that specific dollar amount for the moment will pay for the 30-foot right-of-way on Block 1 and all the amenities attached to that, the elevator, the bathrooms, and then a more active Block 2 with a bridge from Block 1 to Block 2. There'll be a dog park, a play area, some other amenities, and then opening up to meadow and then feathering into forest at the far end of Block 2. So that 11.5 million will cover the building out of those particular parts of the amenity.
Yeah, and I would say, Irene, I think it's going to go a significant way. To put in perspective, I mean, Berry Lane Park was $30 million. It's a larger area, contaminated soil. We put a lot more bells and whistles into that large park. And then the way I'm going to approach it is the same way we did with Berry Lane Park. As soon as we have control of this, we'll go after grants from the state. We'll go after grants from the county. There's open space opportunities. Of course, the city's going to put in dollars. So I think the first step is acquiring the property so we have ultimate control of what our own destiny is going to be. And then from there, I think that we could work with all the different government entities to piece it together. The $11.5 million is going to be a meaningful start, though. You will see some progress there and start to be able to see what this thing will look like when it's completed based on that dollar amount.
And it looks like you've covered parts of some of the additional questions coming in. One question is, how long will all of this take? And
it's a long time.
Will parts of the embankment structure open up as portions are completed?
Well, so it's hard to tell the exact timeline on when construction would start, because a lot of that is based on market dynamics. Are banks willing to lend? What does the developer have going on? This particular developer has other projects in Jersey City. They're building another high-rise building on Marin, and they were in the market looking to acquire another building in the north side of the Holland Tunnel. So there is some familiarity with Jersey City, and it's kind of based on a lot of macro issues, whether they'll start in 1 year or a couple years. With regards to the park, they have an obligation to build the second block. Once we have control of the properties, we have some flexibility on what we're going to be able to do on the other one. So I would suspect that the conversation is going to transition fairly quickly from this sort of discussion around settlement framework to how to piece together dollars on the park. And my intentions are, as soon as we have control of this, to start to figure out how we're going to put all of it together. So I would hope that we're going to start on our pieces very, very quickly.
Thank you, Mayor. Another question is, are there still plans for a ramp from Brunswick to Division? Any more details on what this entails? I might be able to help you there. Once you get past Brunswick, obviously there's no longer an embankment, but there are some trestles that still exist where the rail line used to run. In the short term, we've considered ramp from Brunswick to Division to get onto the embankment blocks from the west. And that would be the interim plan, but ultimately we're looking to have the whole right-of-way elevated all the way all the way west into the lands behind the cemetery. What does that entail? That entails engineering, planning, grant writing, raising funds, and once the land is acquired by the city, one of the biggest steps we'll have to take is getting that planning started together with the city agencies and the public to determine what exactly that will be. I would like to hear more about the possible future light rail. What portion of the embankment would that cover?
There are no concrete plans for the light rail today. We are protecting the right of way long term with the understanding that cities like Jersey City that have this type of density don't usually have opportunities to create light rail that goes throughout the whole city. So Bob Cotter would always say, who's the former planner, that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I think the Embankment Coalition and our administration has really seized on that because it was accurate. So there is no funding at the state. Right now, the city has prioritized pushing for the light rail extension over 440 for Bayfront, and we're moving forward on that on the west side of Jersey City. Once we have control of this property, again, we'll start with the advocacy for the light rail at the federal level and at the state level. Same thing we've done before, but we're not at that stage yet.
Something I can add to that, Mayor, is the embankment width is 95 feet in most cases and about 400 feet long for each embankment block. If there was ever to be light rail on top of the embankment, it would occupy about a 15-foot wide corridor, leaving the rest of the embankment as open space and forest. So it would not preclude the park use. Another question came up, Mayor, and we will be wrapping up by 8 o'clock. After recent issues with the Newport Mall limiting pedestrian access and egress, how will the city ensure that access through Block 1 of the embankment will remain open and accessible to the public?
So I would say first on the Newport issue, Councilman Solomon and I have been working with the Lefrax and the Simon properties. They sent over a proposal 2 weeks ago with regards to access to the mall and making sure that it's protected and safe. We forwarded that to the neighborhood associations, which are going to give us a little bit of feedback. So I think that ultimately will be resolved in the very near term. And then with regards to access here, the right-of-ways are controlled by the city or a nonprofit entity that we ultimately designate. So it's very, very different than the Simon property situation in the mall, which we don't have control of those properties. They're owned by Simon Properties. So I am comfortable that the city will be able to control access and make sure that that first block is never restricted to Jersey City residents that don't live in those buildings.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we've covered everything. We have one question about the bike chute and how is that being conceptualized? Seems like it would need to be a steep ramp. You know, Mayor, we're talking about where we wanted bikes to be able to come down that grand staircase at Marin. And right now the concept is to create a place for someone to wheel their bike down a chute. We're hoping it won't be too steep for someone to manage, but obviously there'll be plans drawn for that, and it'll meet certain standards. I'm sure the bike community will have a lot to say about how that looks.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Well, Mr.
Anything?
Mayor,
Anything? Yeah.
I think we've done well. You did great on the slides. You did
All
a
right, well,
wonderful job.
I try not to put people to sleep on that
I
stuff.
know
So,
you did a great job. We really appreciate it.
let me just say again how thankful I am for all the work that you and Maureen and Christina and Bethany and the entire Bankman Coalition has been doing for literally decades. And I see on the call here, I just scroll through the participants and I see some longtime Jersey City residents and a lot of newer residents as well, which is great. And I hope the newer residents understand the length of time that we've been working on this and the battles that all of you have gone through in order to get to this point. And so it really is a huge milestone that we're on the 2-yard line here, like I was saying earlier, but we still need to get it over that goal line because, our concern, and one of the things we touched on when we spoke a couple of days ago is that, with the change in administration in Washington, that there's a sense from whether it be Conrail or the STB or one of the administrations, either incoming or outgoing, that there's an opportunity to push something through here that isn't necessarily in line with our goals. And that's what we're trying to protect against. And so, we wanted to make sure all of you are up to speed. And if there's something that I didn't cover or Steve or Maureen didn't cover, or that somebody was reluctant to ask in the public chat, you can always email me or Steve or Maureen. We really want to be as transparent as possible. And the goal is to really have acclamation from the city council on this, where everybody is in support, unanimous approval, where people understand that, again, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for Jersey City. So thank you again. And, we'll be in touch. I'll talk to you on Monday after I meet with the building trades.
Thank you, Mayor. We really appreciate your commitment and your support all these years.
Hey, thank you.
Okay. We really appreciate the questions that have been asked, and we'd like to continue to answer questions. You can send questions to us at embankmentjc@gmail.com, and we'll continue to do our best to answer them. But want to thank you all for participating tonight. Please remember to become a member if you're not already, to donate if you can, and to stay tuned for important developments as they come to us. For more information, you could also go to our website at embankment.org. And I want to thank you all for joining us tonight, and be safe. Thank you so much.
Wait, Stephen, before you
Yes,
sign out,
something else?
sorry, I see that Deb I was asking about whether the recording and slides from this meeting are going to be available. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure what we're doing exactly there. We'll have to get back to Deb.
It is recorded. We did record it, and we will call on Brian Williams and Maureen.
And Sean.
We will get it out there. Whether it's a direct link through our website or through our social media, it will become available. We're still working on exactly the best way to facilitate it.
Okay.
I'd also, Stephen, I just wanted to thank people too. And I see a lot of old friends on the, at the meeting. And I especially wanted to send a shout out to Beth Brody, who I haven't seen in a long time. But hello, Beth.
And I wanted to add one more note too, to what Stephen was saying about staying in touch, and also tell, especially if you're newer to Jersey City, tell your friends, tell everyone you know, get them to sign up for the email list, get them to become a member, spread the word, because that's really what we banked on all this time, is really having people to people, word of mouth, get involved kind of contact. So we really appreciate your doing that as well.
Thank you, Bethany. Okay, then. Everyone have a great night. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.